Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for asking me to speak on this work in progress. I'm hoping you can hear me okay. I actually sent Karen's slide set yesterday, and then I sent her an updated one this morning, so I don't know which one you have, but I'd like you, there's only 2 or 3 slides. The 3 slides is on the more updated version. But what I would like you to do is just go to the, stare out the window or go to the slide that just shows the prairies, which is the second slide, and maybe I'll make some introductory comments. So I'm assuming that you are looking at the image of the prairies with the different soil zones. The red is the brown soil zone, the yellow is the dark brown, the light green is the black soil zone, and then we have the dark green being the gray soils, and we've also got the sort of magenta colored soils, which is the Peace River region, which also includes British Columbia. So BC often gets missed when we talk about prairie grain agriculture, and they're very much involved in the Peace River. So I'm going to just say we've all heard it, right? We've got to produce enough food to feed the growing human population, but we must do it in a sustainable way. I think that really has motivated the organic sector for a long time. It's motivated a lot of people. And there is this term called agroecology, which has actually been around for quite a long time. And just to put the two side by side, what is agroecology? There is a very nice textbook written by Steve Gleasman of California on agroecology, and he defines agroecology as the application of ecological concepts and principles to the design and management of sustainable food systems. And so that is something in organic agriculture that we embrace. Things like nitrogen fixation, drawing nitrogen out of the atmosphere with legumes to put them into the soil, something organic farmers really are getting good at through green manures and intercropping and perennial forage legumes, and even legume trees. And so many of the processes that really help organic agriculture function well are what people call agroecological. But it goes a little bit beyond that. Agroecology, I'm just reading from page 18 of Gleasman's textbook, and I'll read another sentence here. Agroecology values the local, empirical knowledge of farmers. I'm going to start that again. Agroecology values the local, empirical knowledge of farmers, the sharing of this knowledge, and its application to the common goal of sustainability. So that definition expands it from just sort of biological processes of nitrogen fixation or maybe other processes to actually including local culture and local experience. And that is so important. And if you look back at that map of the prairies, it's 2 words, the prairies, but it's very diverse. There's very different soil types. There's different cultural, political, economic zones, as well as weather, soil type, and other factors. And so that's a little bit about agroecology, and the 2 sciences that make up agroecology are ecology and agronomy, and these have often had an uneasy relationship. And so what universities have done is to try to deal with this by talking about production and environment simultaneously. And here at the University of Manitoba, we started an agroecology degree back in the mid-1990s, and it's been going on for almost 25 years, and it graduates about 5 to 10 students a year. and they're sort of they're uniquely trained in this area. But okay, so now what the again, getting to the relationship of organic agriculture and agroecology, I heard a very interesting analysis at the Farming System Design Conference in Europe 2 years ago. And the French agricultural department, who's tasked with implementing agroecological practices on their landscape, say that one very good way to become agroecological is to actually be an organic farmer, because nothing prepares you for embracing ecological concepts in a production system as much as doing organics, at least doing it well. Now, I think we could argue that on the prairies there are other farmers, like people who are doing novel grazing systems, holistic management grazing, people who are doing no-till with diversified crop rotation and cover crops. They've also gained an awful lot in terms of making their farms more agroecological. Okay, so that's a bit of background. The second point I wanted to make is, what's going on with this network? What is an NSERC network? Well, first of all, NSERC is defined as the Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council of Canada, and it is for science and engineering. It is the premier funding body. It's federal government funding that supports research at universities across the country. There's also similar bodies for social sciences, and those are called SHRCs. And NSERC funds researchers individually. NSERC funds are very difficult to get. They're very challenging, very competitive. And NSERC funds strategic grants, like they might fund a particular area, like let's say somebody is developing, drought-tolerant crops, and that's a strategic importance to the country, or they're developing something for the space program or the Canadarm. That might be funded under an NSERC strategic grant. And another category, and NSERC also funds a lot of graduate students. Another category NSERC has is what they call a network. And that's really what we're talking about here. And a network means that NSERC supplies money not so much for each individual researcher to be able to, hire more staff or buy more lab equipment, but actually to use that money to work together on a common problem. And that's what we've done. Now, when I talk about we, this NSERC Agroecological Resilience Network is actually based out of the University of Saskatchewan, and Christy Morrissey, who's an ecotoxicologist, works with birds at the University of Saskatchewan, is leading this with NSERC, and Christy and I are co-principal investigators. That means we're leading it together. And we have assembled a large group of environmental and agricultural scientists from across the country to focus simply on the Prairie region. Okay, so that's a little bit about what agroecology is. That's a little bit about what an NSERC network is. So what do we actually propose to do? And to get to Becky's question, how can people participate? Now I'm going to ask you to go to that first slide, the one that is kind of, it's got a big table. It's really, sorry, I was just leaning over to my computer to have it come up. So our NSERC network, it's still just an idea. What we've done is we've applied to NSERC to see if we can write a full application, and that is a very competitive process, and it's called a letter of intent. And we wrote up that letter. We had a meeting in Saskatoon last December. We wrote up that letter of intent for March. We submitted it to NSERC, and it was successful. I mean, it's a letter of intent, but it's a 12-page document. And we were successful. They said, yes, you can go ahead and give us a full proposal. And that is actually a big accomplishment, because most letters of intent do not make it to the next level. And so at this point, we have a 50% chance of getting this thing funded, and we're asking for $5.5 million. And so we are working on our full proposal, and when I work our way through what we're trying to accomplish, you'll see the important role that farmers play. So let's look at the slide. We've got some guiding principles of the work that we're doing. We want to be community-engaged research, focusing on producers at the farm level. So we want to work with farmers who are doing agroecological things. We're going to assess farms for their agroecological performance. We're going to work interdisciplinary. So we've got, for example, the two people leading it. I'm an agronomist. Christy is an environmental scientist. So we've got that sort of agronomy and ecology working together to lead it. But we've got many other people. We've got people from, grazing from the University of Alberta. We've got people who do pollinator work from the University of Calgary and the University of Ottawa. We've got soil people, economic.
Martin, sorry, it's Becky here. I'm just going to interrupt 1 second. We've had a few new people come on. If everybody could please just put your phone on mute. Greatly if we can hear a little bit of background noise there. So if we could get everybody just to put their phone on mute, that would be great. Okay, back to you. Thanks, Martin.
Okay, good. If those of you just joined, welcome. Welcome to our conversation. I'm sitting in Winnipeg where it was 34.8 degrees yesterday. Resilience. Okay, and really one of the other guiding principles is we want to make this practical so we can expand our knowledge, increase our capacity, which means, help farmers work together, learn from each other, help graduate students learn, inform policy. And one of the groups that we're working with is crop insurance. The other one is, of course, ag policymakers. Okay, what are we actually going to do?
Sorry, Martin, I'm just going to interrupt again. I believe that in order to put your phone on mute, you do *6. So there's somebody who is just coughing in the background there. If I could get you to put it on just press *6, it should mute you. Okay, thanks.
Okay, so there's three major activities that we're going to do. One is we want to survey, in the neighborhood of 300 farms across the prairies, where we are interested in finding out what farmers are doing in terms of, addressing the dual goals of production and ecosystem integrity. And then we want to do some on-farm evaluations where we're going to look at we're going to compare those farmer practices to some what we call business as usual farms. And finally, we're going to do some manipulation for resilience testing where we actually will create a stress on a farm, and maybe we'll just go to farms that are going under a drought and look at how the system is responding to that stress. The one thing about working on the prairies, it's so big, we're going to find some problems somewhere every year. And we're intending to do this for 5 consecutive years, beginning next June. That'll generate a bunch of information, and one of the things that we're interested in on the farm survey is to find out what patterns are out there. So if we look at the organic community, we definitely want to engage with the organic community here, is what are farmers doing to respond to particular stresses? Let's say the stress is lack of nitrogen. Let's say it's lack of phosphorus. Let's say it's poor market access because of fusarium in their crop. Let's say it's lack of access to knowledge. So what are those patterns telling us, and how can those be improved? And then we're also interested in understanding farmers, what we really call ecological literacy. What do farmers know about ecological practice? What questions do they have? So we're going to gather a lot of information, and really the trick, going to that fourth thing, integration into the network, that's really the challenging part whenever you're working together, right? Is we all get caught up in our own work, in our own, whether it's on our farm or in our office or in our home or at the university, wherever we work. And And that's not what NSERC wants to do with these networks. They really want people to work together and say, hey, there's a pattern here that relates to why farmers aren't growing a particular crop, which would be really good for sustainability. You know, why is that? Is that linked to either lack of knowledge? Is that linked to poor economic stability? Is that, you know, blah, blah, blah. If we look at faba bean, for example, that is a crop that actually has all kinds of attributes, but it is a little inconsistent in its yield and has terrible markets in some areas of the prairies. And so that's just one example. Another example might be, if we think about on the environmental side, you know, the environmental scientists, they capture birds and they actually look at the blood in those birds, and that tells them something about how what the wetland health is like in that region. And that's a very interesting approach where people can integrate over a large area. They can say, you know, in this area the birds have blood protein profiles or whatever, which shows that they are really deficient in this particular you know, insect that they really need to be healthy and to reproduce, or maybe birds are really healthy in terms of this blood profile, which means that whatever the farmers are doing in this area is really good, and we need to encourage that. And that's what the point of this network is it's kind of like putting the puzzle together and looking for patterns and sometimes you hear this term emergent properties. That means you learn new stuff. And we want to learn new stuff. So that's a little bit about what we're going to do. And now I would just ask you to turn to the bottom slide, which is the one that I got Karen to send out this morning. We're just in the process of putting together this network, and you know, I didn't have a lot of time to prepare for this presentation. But if you do have the last slide, it kind of shows a map of the prairies again, and then it's got the map of a landscape, and at the bottom it's got, you know, a flooded agricultural landscape. And this again speaks to how we're thinking of approaching the work. Is we first of all want to do a regional assessment. We want to assess farm practices and key economic environmental indicators through on-farm investigation and surveys. We have a little bit of experience with that in Canada now. Joanne Thiessen-Martens, who works for me, has been working with the transition farmers and actually doing a farm inventory, visiting the farms, interviewing the farmers across the kitchen table, not just a telephone survey, not just a paper survey or an online survey, but actually sitting face to face. And that's something that we're going to do in this network because, again, if we think about what agroecology means, it values the local empirical knowledge of farmers, the sharing of this knowledge, and its application. And so, and the other piece of this is a number of graduate students around the prairies now have been visiting farms to actually spend a day working with farmers and sort of casually learning about, you know, why do you do this, how do you do that. Farmers might agree that that's a little bit better than a Stats Canada survey. They might also agree that that's more time consuming, but I think it really captures more of what farmers know and what they think and what they feel. And so we'd love some feedback on that. Then the second thing there, you know, we're going to work with about 40 farms looking at business as usual, BAU, versus agroecologically intensive farms. And so that'll allow us to assess the sustainability and resilience using a whole bunch of indicators. And the indicators that we are using is water quality, soil health, productivity, economic performance, and biodiversity. Some of those are kind of business as usual. We've done a lot of economic stuff, we've done a lot of production stuff, and we've more recently there's quite a bit of data on soil health. Things like biodiversity and water quality have not received as much attention, especially when it comes to the farm level and the landscape level. And then the final thing we're going to do is what we call these experimental manipulations. Is, you know, and we're not sure how exactly we're going to do this yet. We have until the end of January next year to finish this proposal and figure this out. But we want to test the stability and resilience to flood and stress and other stressors. I mean, they could be economic stressors. They could be market access stressors. They're all connected, as farmers well know. And you know, we'd like to hear from farmers, what are their bigger stresses? I mean, if we look at the canola sector, I think the canola growers would say, well, flea beetles are a major problem for us, and so, you know, we're really reluctant to give up neonicotinoids tomorrow because we need that kind of protection for that insect pest. And organic farmers would have a very different set of questions about resilience. I mean, one of the things that we've noticed, knock on wood, is after 26 years of organic farming, you know, we really haven't had an insect outbreak. Now, we're not growing crops in monoculture like canola, and so our stressors might be different. It might be back to you know, how do we establish a crop when it's really dry and we haven't got no-till farming options available to us the way our no-till neighbors do, or it could be, you know, how do we get better performance out of our animals when we're feeding them forage that might be slightly low in phosphorus because our land is operating at a lower soil phosphorus level. So we're very interested in hearing from organic farmers about what are their stresses. You know, and so that's what we're going to be doing in this network. Where we're at right now, I'm just going to wrap up here right away. We've assembled our group of scientists, and we've got about 45 scientists working with us across the country, and we are now consulting with stakeholders. So, for example, we're having a meeting in Winnipeg next Friday, and we've invited all the stakeholders from the prairies, and that includes the organic associations. Christy and I will be traveling to western Manitoba. We'll be traveling to Saskatchewan. We'll be traveling to Alberta in October to visit with stakeholders there, to hear about what you people might think is important in such a network. And some people might say, well, I'm not really interested in this network. And yeah, it is yet another research project going on that's potentially going to consume some significant taxpayers' dollars. But we feel that if we ask the right questions and if we have the involvement of the farmers, we may be able to sort out some of our challenges in a way that we haven't before, because we're working with such a broad group of people as specialists, and we're working with practitioners on the land, the farmers, and the industry. There's also international component to this. We are working with the Land Institute in Kansas and with John Lundgren, who's a private entomology researcher in South Dakota. Those two have already signed on to work with us, but we're looking at NSERC wants some international collaboration. Final point is, you know, we're also thinking about the future. You know, it was 34.8 degrees in Winnipeg yesterday. That smashed the previous record by a long margin. And you know, what does the future hold? There's all kinds of stresses on the prairies. There's, you know, mineral and oil exploration stresses. There's climate change stresses. There's the usual annual variation in weather. I checked the weather records, and in 1952 it was like 32 degrees yesterday, and a couple of days later it was 2 degrees. So, you know, the weather and our temperatures do swing wildly. What does the future hold in terms of our population centers? How many more people are going to be on the prairies? What are our transportation networks going to look like? The prairies are one of the world's breadbaskets. That is true, and I don't imagine that's going to change in the future. We are engaging with the grain sector on this network because we know that for economic prosperity in the region, exporting crops to people who will pay us money for it is actually quite important. So anyways, I think I've said a lot, and I think I'm just going to stop there and be guided by Becky from here on in.